And this is kind of the part of the story that, I don't know, I don't think I've talked about before in the past. Hey everyone, it's Abbey Sharp, kind of sick. That's why I'm recording Abby's Kitchen here in my bedroom. But today I just thought we would take it easy and I would get super personal and talk a little bit about my eating disorder story. Just recently it hit me that, it's been a really, really long time since I gave any details into my own history with my eating disorder. And it just kind of struck me as backwards because I think it's probably very hard to understand what I do and why I do it without understanding where I came from. I've grown this platform so much, so there's a lot of you who maybe don't really know this story. And in that time, disordered eating has probably become even more rampant, if you can imagine that. And despite that, it still feels very taboo to admit that you struggle with food or your body. But I really believe that one of the most responsible things that I can do with my platform here is to share my story openly and honestly. Because if just one person sees themselves in my experience and thinks, maybe that way of thinking is not normal or healthy and maybe I should do something about that, then I feel like I've done my job. So grab your coffee. I got mine. My husband made me this amazing mug, bowl, whatever you want to call it, and your emotional support animal if you have one, and get ready for a ride. Now, obviously, of course, based on what I've just told you, the content of this video might be triggering for some people, so please bow out if this video is not right for you at this time in your journey. Oh, and before we get into the story, I really did want to tell you about what I'm sitting on right now, brought to you by my sponsor, 0rth0rexia. So at this point, you have probably heard me talk about 0rth0rexia before. I talked about them, I think, last year because their original mattress cover, the pod, has completely revolutionized my sleep. Right, Poppy? And of course, that in turn has been so important for my overall mental health. But 0rth0rexia just launched their newest generation of the Pod 4, which is what I'm sitting on right now, plus its sister product, the Pod 4 Ultra. So like the original Pod 4 is a mattress cover that has seamless sensors that tracks how you sleep, and then it uses this information to personalize the temperature of your mattress on your side of the bed. It has been trained on over 1.2 million of hours of sleep, and the new Autopilot 3.0 is hyper-personalized and responsive to help you spend more time in that deep or REM sleep. Compared to the first model that I had, it has 2 times more cooling power, custom elevation adjustments, and tap to control zones. So the tap to control zones are really cool. They're basically 2 responsive sensor areas that allow you to control your pod even without your phone simply by tapping on your side of the bed. It also underwent a complete redesign, so it's completely invisible and imperceivable when installed. I just started sleeping on the Pod 4 and I was totally in love with the original pod, but I'm loving the upgrades that they made here. And obviously I recognize that this is a premium product, no question, but for someone who struggled very, very badly with sleep and has really come to recognize how important it's been for my overall health, I do think for me, it's been worth its weight in gold. Now, 0rth0rexia is currently shipping to the United States, Canada, UK, Europe, and Australia. So head on over to 0rth0rexia.com/Abby and use my promo code Abby to get $350 off of the Pod 4 Ultra. Okay, I want to take you back to high school. I grew up in a smallish city called Peterborough. I feel like we need to cue a Taylor Swift song here. But anyways, high school for me were actually kind of like the golden days in a lot of ways. I was probably the happiest and the healthiest psychologically that I had ever been. I had always had anxiety. It's basically been a lifelong disorder since I was a tiny little tot, staying up all night, sick to my stomach about the next day's dance competition. But in high school, I was just really at the top of my game, and my anxiety was basically as low as it had ever been and probably has ever been since then, even today. So yeah, it was great. But I was a musical theater student at an art school, and I had a promising singing career on the horizon. And I could get up on stage and sing and dance and act and not give a really, the confidence was unreal. And I also had a completely neutral relationship with food and my body. I was a completely normal, healthy sized teenager, fresh out of puberty. So obviously that meant I had significantly more body fat on myself then that I had a few years prior, but never, ever did I feel insecure about it or feel like it was something that I had to change. Like if you watch my video on what I ate in high school, I literally ate whatever the hell I wanted. And it was usually like a chocolate chip cookie and chocolate milk at breakfast, veggie lo mein noodles at lunch, and soy chalet for dinner. I still love soy chalet. Argue with me on the chalet sauce, it slaps. I just truly didn't think about it. It was just so freeing. And honestly, the way it should be for a growing teenager, right? Like teens should not be wondering if butter is a carb. But then at 17, because I'm a December baby, I graduated and I moved away from my hometown to Toronto, where I am now, where I basically knew nobody. I decided to take a gap year before starting university so that I could start to focus on my singing career. So like I was working with a big talent agent and producers here and in London and New York, and ultimately just like trying to score a record deal, as one does when they're 17. But you know, putting that kind of pressure on myself as a young person where my whole purpose for 12 months was to try to make it before time ran out was crippling for somebody who had existing anxiety. You know, I was lonely because I had no friends there. I was bored. I had, you know, nothing to do between auditions. I was a perfectionist, and I was ultimately very worried about letting everybody down. And that is really when I feel my anxiety disorder really started to take hold, full force. You know, as a lot of you probably know if you've watched any of my other kind of more personal videos like this, I've struggled with IBS my entire life. And I didn't know to call it IBS when I was younger, but when I was a teenager, I just kind of thought that it was kind of normal to feel junky after most meals. But as a lot of you know, anxiety and IBS do go hand in hand. And during this more stressful and sad, lonely period of my life, my digestion definitely got out of whack, really out of hand. You know, I thought, this is not good. I should probably speak to someone. And I did not know what a dietitian was. I probably didn't even realize that that was an actual profession. But through somehow, some way, I heard about a naturopath and I went to see this homeopathic naturopath instead. Sidebar here, folks. There are some great evidence-based naturopaths out there who I do feel are super qualified to give great nutrition advice. That said, now knowing what I know now, when I see homeopathy or homeopathy, I'm not sure the pronunciation in that context, but you know, I just see a lot of red flags. But I didn't know that then. Anyways, so I do remember this homeopathic naturopath giving me some tinctures maybe for stress that tasted terrible. But the main takeaway I recall was that I needed to eliminate all sugar from my diet. I don't remember what the rationale was, but I wasn't a nutrition expert at the time, so I just trusted the advice blindly. Do not do this, folks. This is why I'm here. I really hope that one of the takeaways from this video is to do research on who you're taking nutrition advice from, both online and in person, because this one interaction really threw me into a dark place, as I'm going to elaborate on right now. As a lot of you guys know, I'm a perfectionist, and inherently I have like an all or nothing kind of personality. So if you give me a challenge, I am going all out for it. Like 150%. So this very soon became a bit of like an obsessive game to me. I learned that anything that ends in ose is a sugar, and it's everywhere. So basically that narrowed down my safe foods pretty quickly. And not surprisingly, I started to lose weight. And people at my day job or when I went to visit back home, you know, people would start to compliment me, asking me like, Abby, what have you been doing? You look so good. And I would say, oh, you know, nothing. I just cut out junk food, or I'm being good. I'm just taking better care of my body and my health, etc. But as a people pleaser, I liked this response. Basically, any external praise felt like I was being given a big hit of dopamine, and it just kind of gave me this temporary high out of my state of anxiety and sadness. And I now know that I have ADHD and always have, so I basically had been starved of dopamine, which made it really, really easy to get addicted to that feeling of success. So in my juvenile mind, of course, I thought, well, if people are praising me for my willpower in cutting out sugar, imagine how much more praise and love I'm gonna get if I can clamp down a little bit more. And so that's what I did. Like, sugar was out and I was basically terrified of it at this point, but I had mastered that challenge. The game was like easy for me now. So it was time that I took it to the next level and I cut out fat too. Because from basically all the diet magazines that I had read, sugar was fattening, but obviously fat was also fattening. Keep in mind, this was like the early 2000s, so well before the keto days. Diet culture was definitely much simpler back then, but very, very toxic at the same time. So that means like I traded my real salad dressing for a horrendous Walden Farms one with 0 calories. I ate like a little tiny container of fat-free, sugar-free yogurt basically anytime I had like a hunger pang. And I would have like sugar-free Jell-O with fat-free Cool Whip. That was like my nightly dessert. Oh, it is just so cringe to think about these meals, if you want to call them that. But obviously trying to eliminate both sugar and fat took a lot more willpower and a lot more control. But one thing it absolutely meant was that nobody could prepare meals for me. No restaurants, no fast food, no family or friends doing the cooking. Thankfully, my parents were never really into cooking. They didn't love cooking, so they were very happy for me to like take an interest and want to prepare all the family meals for everybody, right? Like that's kind of what people with EDs often do. And I was so good at making myself believe that all of this was just for good health or to help my digestion that I had convinced them and everybody else that there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. This was not a problem. So I guess they thought that I just kind of wanted to contribute to the household chores out of the kindness of my heart, not that I was doing all of the cooking selfishly so that I could make sure that my meal was 100% oil-free. It's important to clarify that I was actually never motivated by aesthetics. Like I truly did not want to get skinnier and skinnier. In fact, when I really started to lose a lot of weight, I hated my body even more. Like I was so embarrassed by it, and I would try to hide it with all of these like big baggy clothes or wearing multiple layers, but it was like meticulously controlling what went into my body felt exhilarating and also calming at the same time. So like the list of foods that I was allowed to eat was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And to me, that almost felt like a marker of success. This is kind of the part of the story that, I don't know, I don't think I've talked about before in the past. Like I didn't talk about it in my first book, Mindful Glow, where I do share some parts of my story. And I don't think I've really gone into detail on this when I've discussed my orthorexia in the past online. And maybe that's because I still have this like deep-seated voice saying, you failed at your ED. Even though now I know that coming out on the other side was nothing short of an incredibly successful, brave feat. But after weeks, maybe months, I don't know exactly when things started to switch, but when weeks or months of severe restriction and ongoing weight loss, obviously I started to binge. And in fact, binging became like worked into my weekly routine. So this is basically how my week would go. Tuesday through Saturday, I would eat the exact same thing for breakfast, lunch, snacks, and I would make my family dinner comprised of basically all sugar-free, fat-free, safe foods. And then on Sunday, I would fast all day and I would be really, really, really hungry. And I would try to pacify my hunger with chai tea and like a little splash of skim milk all day long. That was just like, I was running on chai tea. And I would just like spend the day running errands with my mom, basically trying to distract myself from that hunger. And honestly, I still can't drink or smell chai tea anymore because it triggers so many toxic memories and feelings. And I loved chai tea. But anyways, I was doing this whole fast thing to kind of save up calories for my big cheat meal where my family and I would go to dinner on Sunday nights. I would order the highest calorie, highest fat, highest sugar meal that I could find on the menu, eat until I was stuffed. Then I would go to a dessert place in Toronto called Dimitri's and order like a slice of cheesecake with ice cream, with like caramel and whipped cream, like everything, size of my head, and I would eat all of it. Monday would come and I would be so sick, so full. I would have the worst sugar high headache imaginable. My blood sugars would be crashing, and I was just getting this overwhelming desire to binge even more. Like, it was very, very bad. It was a terrible cycle. I don't know how I came up with the structure in my head, but I would basically, again, fast all day, drink tea all day, have dinner, have a healthy dinner with my parents, and then binge again on like a half a cheesecake from the freezer. And then Tuesday would come and I would start fresh with my cornflakes and fat-free milk and my 35 calorie yogurt and my massive salads with Walden Farms dressings, etc. I remember my parents were starting to get suspicious as they kind of watched this pattern of me eating all of these clean foods all week, only to go out for dinner with them and eat an overwhelming amount of food for my body shape and size, and also like all the quote unquote unhealthy foods. But whenever I would get questioned, I would say, oh, well, all of these kinds of foods upset my stomach and they upset my digestion, but I still really like them. So if I'm gonna feel sick, I'm just gonna feel sick for one day instead of every day of the week. And I guess that excuse made sense, made enough sense, it worked, because it kind of got people kind of off my back and just allowed me to continue on with this like super dangerous toxic cycle. And I did this for many, many months. And my body continued to shrink. Despite this whole like binging episode, I was eating so little throughout the rest of the week that I had obviously created such an enormous calorie deficit that I was still losing a lot of weight. And even though I was causing this to happen with my own behaviors, with my own choices, I hated myself even more. I ended up becoming more and more of a recluse because I couldn't participate in any kind of social events or dinners. I was embarrassed and loathed my emaciated body, and the misery of the restrict binge cycle was just further exacerbating my anxiety and depression. At that point in my life, I was really feeling like a failure at everything. I started to control food basically in an effort to feel some element of success and control over the rest of my life, some element of my life. But I ended up even more out of control and having these massive binges that really was proof that I was a failure. But looking back, I have so much empathy for my former self. At 17, at that particularly very vulnerable moment in time, my life was really a perfect storm for brewing up a wicked ED. I was lonely and anxious about the timeline that I had arbitrarily set for myself on my singing career, all of which I kind of felt like I had no control over. Controlling food kind of gave me that false sense of control as like a sort of game that I could seemingly succeed at. Success was made evident by all the positive reinforcement I was getting from people who kind of respected my willpower and my shrinking body. And I didn't know this at the time, but I had an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, OCPD, which is basically obsessive compulsive perfectionism, and ADHD, right? All of these are risk factors for an eating disorder. If you ever feel like your problematic relationship with food is just like somehow fully your fault, that you've done something wrong in life to deserve this, I do hope that you can have some self-empathy and compassion, because for a lot of us, the odds are just not in our favor. So, how did I get out? The million-dollar question, right? Well, obviously, things had to get really, really bad before they got better. I somehow kept this up, this crazy pattern of eating, for like 2 long, miserable years, just like that. And that left me severely underweight, to the point that laying in a comfortable bed on a comfortable soft mattress hurt my bones because there was no fat to protect them. It was just my bones were jutting into the mattress and it hurt. That bone pain is worse than childhood child labor. I was also definitely in denial that anything was wrong, but I ended up being convinced by my doctor and my parents to see a dietitian. And I remember her trying to like suss out my stage of readiness for change by saying, like, asking me like, okay, so why do you eat fat-free cheese? And I would say, well, I just like it. I don't like the richness of regular fat. Clearly, I was not in a sound state of mind, and I was lying to everyone, including myself, because nobody likes fat-free cheese. I'm joking, but at the same time, I'm not. So it was definitely a process of slowly adding more calories into my day to basically get myself to weight restore, which is a very important, critical first step. You know, underfueling your body literally hijacks a healthy brain, because our brains consume 20% of our daily caloric intake. So a starved brain just can't think clearly, which makes it so much more difficult to manage like anxiety and any other mental health disorder. And if the underlying anxiety is not being well managed, it basically just further fuels the ED. So even though I still had my eating disorder voice barking away at me, just having started to weight restore was imperative to helping me quiet it down. The next step, though, was really to tackle that voice and to really face my food fears head on. So at this point, like a few years had passed, I was a student in a nutrition program because, FYI, there's a very, very, very high rate of folks with disordered eating who end up going into professions in nutrition and health and wellness, so like dietetics, naturopathy, etc. But I was in a much better place with my weight, though I was still struggling with these orthorexic tendencies towards rigidity and kind of controlling the quality of the food that I was eating, etc. And again, these were things that could be easily disguised as just an interest in health, like everybody else in the program. So I might have been eating more calories, but the list of foods that I was allowing myself to eat was still very limited. I was also still very into like healthy cooking because #food control. So one of my friends at my nutrition school suggested that I start a food blog to share some of my healthy recipes. This was like 2 decades ago, folks. I didn't even know what a food blog was. Like, this blogging was not a thing. I'm a geriatric early adopter of the food blog. But I Googled blogging and I set it up on like Blogspot or something and I got cracking. Sidebar, this is so cringe what I'm going to tell you, but you know what I called this food blog? I'm so embarrassed right now. I called it Trust the Skinny Cook. Like a play on, you know, never trust the skinny cook. Like, I thought that was a good idea for a blog title. Those were dark times indeed. See, my brain still was not working, clearly. But anyway, my blog grew and I started to get invitations to all of these restaurant launches and food events and things like that. And then suddenly my food anxiety just like revved up again because I was loving this new role as a food blogger and I was dopamine deprived, so I loved all the positive feedback, but I was also quite terrified of going to food events or like restaurant openings where I couldn't control the food. Restaurant food is notorious for being high in sugar and high in fat and all the bad things that I was trying not to eat. So I really had to put on my big girl panties and make a very scary decision. I was either going to retreat back into my lonely ED, living in my own little safe food bubble, or I was going to start living my life. And I decided to go for it. I took a leap, like a leap. I went all in, as Stephanie Buttermore says, and I kind of just said like yes to life. I don't know. I guess I've always had this all or nothing personality, so just going all in and saying yes to going to 4 restaurant meals every week was like the best shot I had at true recovery, at true happiness in my life. And at first, of course, I was very scared that I was going to eat so much of the bad food and basically spiral out of control with my body and food as I had done so many times before. And of course I was going to think that because I went years where any restaurant experience that I had was this massive 10,000 calorie bender. Like, what was going to happen if I did that multiple times a week and I didn't starve myself before and after? But what actually happened was the complete opposite. I ate normally in the day of the event. I'd go to the event, I would have a cocktail, I'd have a bite or two of like every dish that they brought out to sample, and then I would stop when I was full because I knew that that was not going to be the last time I was going to have a fun, delicious meal. I might have had another restaurant lunch the next night. So this was like the ultimate crash course in intuitive eating, but I really did learn how to listen to and honor my body. And I also built so many amazing relationships and made so many friends in the process that really like solidified that social aspect of food that I knew I was never willing to give up on again. Like I was so happy, so fulfilled. I honestly didn't care if I did gain weight. And again, you can see how EDs are often a symptom of a bigger, deeper challenge in your life, which for me, again, was my anxiety. But working on yourself at either end can help to feed the recovery of the other and vice versa. All of that is to say, I don't think an eating disorder just ever goes away for good, right? Like there isn't a switch that we can turn off after a few therapy sessions. Like in my experience, you're always vulnerable, particularly when the root of your eating disorder gets triggered. So in my case, that's my anxiety and my OCPD. Thankfully, over the years, I have developed a number of really great coping strategies that help to distract me from even going to food. Now, not all of them are super healthy. For example, after I recovered from obsessing over food, I basically addiction transferred my obsession to sleep, which resulted in full-blown insomnia that basically almost truly ruined my life. But it's a work in progress, right? Like it always will be. And for me, one of the best things that I ever did to improve my underlying mental health issues that kind of lie at the core of all of my controlling tendencies is taking medication. Like, it has honestly changed my life. And I talk a lot more about that in my video right here. So yeah, I cannot stress enough the importance of doing the work, hopefully with a professional therapist, really just to help you understand the why behind your disordered eating. Because while weight restoring is of course a crucial first step, it can be a little bit like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound, as you'll just forever be susceptible to relapse when that root cause gets triggered. Whew, yeah. Sharing my story definitely feels cathartic, to be honest. And obviously, I just really hope that it helped at least one of you to start to think about your why and maybe inspire you to kind of kickstart your own recovery journey as well. I really do know how lonely it can feel when you are in the throes of an ED and you probably think no one could possibly ever understand what you're going through. So if you guys are willing to share your own stories, I am sure that everyone could benefit from other support in the comment section alone. I just think that would be really cool. But on that note, that's all that I have for you guys today. I'm gonna rest the old voice. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let's be kind in the comments for everyone. And I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.